What would you do if the cost of the medications that keep you alive suddenly doubled overnight? Not because of a shortage, not because of an innovative formula, but because of a tweet. Former President Donald Trump is imposing a 200% tariff on imported pharmaceutical products. This isn't just an economic policy, it's a decision that could change lives all over the world. From elderly patients in Ohio to drug manufacturers in Australia and Canada, the repercussions are already being felt. This isn't just about trade, but about trust, health, and the fine line between protecting the industry and punishing the people. Number 1. The announcement that shocked the system. On an otherwise ordinary morning, a tweet from Donald Trump lit up the political landscape like a bolt of lightning. If it's not made in the United States, we'll slap a 200% tariff on it. He wasn't talking about cars or steel. He was talking about medicine. Yes, life-saving pharmaceutical products. The proposed deadline, the 1st of August. That's less than a month for global pharmaceutical suppliers to reconsider, redirect, or withdraw. At first glance, it looks like a classic Trump-era economic policy. Tough tariffs to boost domestic production. But this time, it struck a much more sensitive nerve. Because medicine isn't a negotiable product, it's not a luxury item, it's not a smartphone you can go without for a year. It's the insulin that keeps your mother alive. It's the heart medication that keeps your grandfather from having to go to the emergency room. Tariffs on steel factories have an impact. Tariffs on chips will affect your next phone upgrade. But tariffs on medicine? They determine whether someone wakes up tomorrow or not. That's the real impact. It's not just about balancing trade deficits or bringing jobs back. It's about restructuring an industry that's deeply global and deeply human with a single tough political measure. And while politicians and economists struggle to model the outcomes, patients, hospitals, and pharmacists are left with the one question no trade deal can answer. What happens if the cost of staying alive becomes unaffordable? It's no longer just about economics. It's about the ethics of turning medicine into a bargaining chip at the global trade table. Number 2. Because this tariff isn't just an economic policy. To understand why a 200% pharmaceutical tariff could be devastating, you first have to understand how medicine is actually made today. It's not a single-country operation. It's a global relay race. Let's take a common cancer drug as an example. The active ingredient is probably synthesized in India or China. Then it's shipped to Canada, where it's formulated into a tablet or injection. From there, it's packaged in the US or Mexico. Finally, it's sold back across borders, even right here in the United States. That's just one pill. Multiply that complexity by thousands of drugs, and you'll see why this isn't a standard trade negotiation. Now imagine applying a 200% tariff to that entire supply chain. The cost skyrockets. The flow of products slows down. And the final price? That gets passed on to you, the patient. Hospitals will have to revise their budgets overnight. Insurance companies will have to adjust premiums and coverage. Pharmacies will raise prices or simply run out of stock. And for many families, the consequences aren't theoretical. It's real and it's urgent. A diabetic parent who now pays $40 for insulin could suddenly be facing a bill of $120 next month. A child with epilepsy might find that their medication isn't available at all because suppliers can't absorb the cost. This isn't just about policy. For some families, this is about survival. Unlike other products, you can't just wait out rising drug prices. You can't just stop taking heart medication or delay cancer treatment. This is medicine. The risks are immediate. So when we say this isn't just an economic policy, we mean it's a moral issue. Number 3. The Australian did lock a healthcare system under pressure. When Trump's proposed 200% tariffs came to an end, Australia didn't flinch. Instead, they made one thing absolutely clear. We will not trade public health for market access. To understand that bold response, you need to know about something called the PBS. The Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme is one of the pillars of the Australian healthcare system. Here's how it works. Before a drug reaches Australian pharmacies, the government negotiates directly with pharmaceutical companies to set affordable prices. That means Australians can access essential medicines, often for just a few dollars, while the same drug could cost 10 times more in the United States. Sounds great for patients, right? Well, the American pharmaceutical giants hate it. They argue that the PBS undermines the free market. In other words, they can't charge the inflated prices they're used to in the United States. And now, with the threat of a 200% tariff on the table, many believe that, by pressuring Australia, they're trying to eliminate or weaken the PBS to keep their pharmaceutical exports flowing. The pressure is real. Australia exports more than $2 billion in pharmaceutical products to the United States every year, and one company, CSL, based in Melbourne, is a major player in the global market. But here's what's remarkable. Despite that economic risk, Australia is standing firm. Government officials have openly stated that the PBS is not up for negotiation. It's not just a policy, it's a public good. Australians have fought hard to protect it. It's the reason why many people can afford long-term treatments without going broke. In a world where countries often give in to trade pressure, Australia's refusal is more than just a political stance, period. It's a message. It doesn't prioritize. Number 4. Canada's silent countermeasure. The calm before the storm. While Australia took a bold and public stance, Canada chose silence. But don't mistake that for inaction. Behind the scenes, Canada is moving forward with quiet urgency. Health Canada has already drawn up a national list of essential medications essential for the daily treatment of millions of Canadians. It's a precautionary measure designed to prepare for shortages and for when imports or pharmaceutical ingredients suddenly become too expensive or simply unavailable. But it doesn't stop there. According to internal government sources, memos are already circulating, outlining risk scenarios, budget forecasts, and contingency plans. Canadian pharmaceutical associations are pressuring U.S. lawmakers, not with trade threats, but with data and humanitarian appeals. The message? It's not just about trade. It's about lives on both sides of the border. And that's no exaggeration. Canada's pharmaceutical system is closely intertwined with the U.S. supply chain. In fact, many medications cross the border between the United States and Canada 2 or 3 times before reaching a pharmacy. Even more critically, 90% of Canada's pharmaceutical raw materials come from China and India, the same countries already affected by other U.S. tariffs. So when Trump threatens a 200% import tax, Canada doesn't just feel it at the border, it feels it deep within its supply chain, down to the ingredient level. That's why a tariff like this isn't just a foreign policy issue. It's an existential threat to how Canadian healthcare operates. But instead of fighting back with press conferences, Canada is building a medical firewall. Stockpiling supplies. Diplomatic lobbying. And getting ready to protect number 5, the broader consequences. Global trust at risk. While Australia fights back and Canada quietly prepares, other U.S. allies are watching closely. Behind closed doors in Tokyo, Seoul, and Brussels, the conversations are tense, not just about trade, but about trust. Japan and South Korea, 2 of the United States' most developed, loyal economic and military allies, recently received letters from the White House warning of new trade sanctions against both countries. The reaction was not one of anger, but something more unsettling. Confusion, disappointment, doubt. A prominent South Korean journalist put it bluntly. We used to believe that the United States was our protector. Now it seems that our loyalty is being put to the test. In Japan, where national pride runs deep, the idea of being treated as just another negotiating partner, rather than a strategic ally, has sparked widespread concern. And it's not just a political issue. The Japanese stock market plummeted, with companies like Takeda Pharmaceutical and Toyota feeling the pressure. The European Union has not escaped scrutiny either. Officials in Brussels have begun reviewing trade frameworks and fast-tracking alternative pharmaceutical partnerships. A quiet yet telling change of course. All of this points to a larger and more dangerous trend. When friends start facing tariff threats, what happens to alliances? The United States has long been considered the pillar of global stability, not only for its security, but also for its fairness in international trade. But this kind of aggressive policy, especially when aimed at medicine, shakes those foundations. Because tariffs can be renegotiated. Trade agreements can be rewritten. But trust? Once it's damaged, it's hard to fix. And the domino effect is already visible in diplomatic briefings. Number 6, the human cost. The stories behind the statistics. Let's set politics aside for a moment. Because behind all the tariffs and trade talks, there's Frank. Frank, 74 years old, lives in a small town in Ohio and takes 3 medications every day. One for his heart, another for blood pressure, and another to manage chronic pain. 2 of those medications are made in Canada, the third comes from a supplier in Australia. Right now, what is his total out-of-pocket cost? About $1.45 per month. But if the 200% tariff goes through, that number could triple. Frank lives on a fixed income. He budgets for food, rent, heating in the winter, and his medications. If prices go up, he'll have to choose. Not between brands, but between prescriptions and groceries. And Frank is not alone. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, 29% of Americans over 60 have already skipped doses or avoided filling prescriptions just because of the cost. AARP reports that 80% of seniors take at least 1 medication a day. Nearly 40% take 5 or more. And what happens if a single prescription goes up by $50? Multiply that by 5 and you're looking at an extra $250 a month for people who are already struggling. We often say that policies affect real people. But this isn't abstract. This is a cancer patient delaying chemotherapy. A parent skipping a prescription refill for their diabetic child. A stroke survivor rationing their pills. And here's the thing. We can put off buying a new phone. We can postpone a vacation, but can we delay cancer treatment? Medicine isn't a luxury, it's not optional. And for the most vulnerable, the elderly, the poor, the chronically ill, this cost isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Number 7. Beyond tariffs. Are we redefining the moral boundaries of trade? Let's take a step back, because at some point we have to ask ourselves, should trade policy have the power to override medical ethics? Tariffs are meant to protect industries, stimulate local production, and rebalance trade deficits. And in many sectors, steel, automobiles, microchips, that makes sense. But medicine? That's different. When a pill becomes unaffordable, it's not just a market correction. It's a missed chemotherapy appointment. A child left without antibiotics. An adult with diabetes forced to ration insulin. So, where do we draw the line? What happens when economic leverage collides with human vulnerability? Is a higher GDP worth it if it leaves millions of people without access to basic care? We often measure success in terms of exports, growth, and efficiency, but maybe we need to start asking tougher questions. How healthy is a country that lets its people skip treatments just to balance a spreadsheet? What is the long-term cost of a policy that erodes trust in public health systems? Because here's the truth. A country's strength isn't measured only by its economy, but by how it protects its people when times get tough. We're not saying that trade policy shouldn't exist, of course it should. But when that policy extends into the realm of health, when it dictates who gets treatment and who doesn't, it stops being just an economic strategy and becomes a moral decision. And if we normalize the use of medicine as a bargaining chip in trade disputes, we might gain power in the short term, but we risk losing something much more important: our humanity. Number 8. What does this mean for you? Let's bring it home for a moment, because whether you live in the United States, Canada, Australia, or anywhere in between, you are part of this story. If you take medication, care for someone who does, or simply rely on a stable healthcare system, this isn't just global news, this is personal. The proposed 200% pharmaceutical tariff isn't just a number thrown into a trade debate. It's a spark, and the fire it could ignite would spread quickly. Medication shortages, sky-high prices, delays in care, and added pressure on hospitals and already overburdened insurance systems. So, what should we be watching for in the coming weeks? First, the 1st of August, that's the deadline set by Trump. If the tariff policy goes into effect without exemptions, the consequences could begin immediately. Second, your country's response. Will governments negotiate, resist, or remain silent like Canada? Will industries lobby behind closed doors to secure exemptions? Will public pressure make any difference? Third, keep an eye on medication prices, not just at your local pharmacy, but across the board. Even small price increases in common medications could be an early sign of the consequences of this looming trade conflict. And finally, stay alert to how the conversation is being framed. Are leaders talking about people, or are they only talking about numbers? Because behind every statistic there is a patient, behind every supply chain there is a family trying to stay healthy, And in the midst of all this, there's you. So don't ignore this just because it's wrapped up in politics. This is one of those moments when politics and personal life collide, and you'll feel it whether you're watching from New York, Vancouver, or Sydney, in a world where political decisions continued. If this topic has touched your heart, check out our latest video. It connects deeply with today's story. And if you believe in thoughtful, well-researched content, support us with a click, hit that subscribe button. We work hard to bring you the truth.